Time now for your winners and losers from Week 13, and it was good to be a member of the NFC West. Brock Purdy, 4 touchdowns. DK Metcalf, 3 touchdowns. You know what? Sam Laporta had a big day as well, the tight end position for the Lions. And Alvin Kamara, well, he was awesome as well for the Saints, even in a loss for New Orleans. As you take a look here as the notable performers, but that's not the only winners we're going to talk about here as we give you some of our winners as well, and a couple losers, some waiver wire options as well, and get you set for Monday Night Football. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. Heath, let's get right into it with some winners from us. I'll start with my list, and it was fun to be Nico Collins as a member of the Texans. Unfortunately, seeing his teammate go down with Tank Dell suffering that injury, but that's going to be big for Nico Collins moving forward. We'll get more into him in a second as we show you some of the other winners for me for this week, including a tight end and Trey McBride, who are going to miss on a bye week in Week 14, one of only 2 teams on a bye, Arizona and Washington. But Jordan Love looking like a legit NFL quarterback, but certainly a legit fantasy quarterback as well. Welcome back to Devon Achane. Good to see him back in action. I didn't think he was going to do very much against the Washington Commanders, not necessarily because of his play, but just because of how much the Dolphins would use him. Even playing on that field scared me a little bit, but you see here, 20 total touches, 2 touchdowns. He was fantastic. But Nico Collins really the story, I think, for the Texans moving forward, because they lose Tank Dell for the rest of the season. And you see the numbers for Collins here, 12 targets, 9 catches, huge performance, scored a touchdown again. And now he's definitely the #1 receiver in Houston. Noah Brown will have some moments and opportunities. Hopefully Dalton Schultz comes back healthy from the hamstring injury, and we'll see if Robert Woods can chip in as well. But this is now the Nico Collins receiving core, and he's going to be great for fantasy managers.
It was another big day for Matthew Stafford. Now 7 touchdowns in his last 2 games, looking like he might actually be a late season streamer if he can keep those weapons healthy for the Rams. Also, Chuba Hubbard, first game with the new coaching staff, 74% of the rush attempts go to Chuba Hubbard. He has a monster day, scores 2 touchdowns. Definitely a viable flex on a weekly basis, maybe even a low-end number 2 running back. Sam Laporta, his highest number of targets since October. Really his first big explosion with both Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs on the field. But my big winner was Rashee Rice, Jamey. We talked all week about how we were hoping that what we saw in Week 12 was what we would see moving forward. And in Week 13, we got it again. 9 targets. That's now at least 9 targets, at least 8 catches, at least 67% of the snaps in back-to-back games for Rashee Rice. He's got 80% of his targets on the season, and he's a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy over the last 2 weeks. He looks like a must-start wide receiver rest of season.
Yeah, I know you like Rice. I know there's another member of the Chiefs you're not so fond of. We'll show that player when we get to your losers. My losers for Week 13, a couple of Chargers. I know they won the game, but 6-0, 6 points from that Chargers offense. Look, the Patriots defense still putting up good production and stopping opponents, but this was not what we expected from Justin Herbert or Austin Eckler. Adam Thielen, it might be time just to sit him down. Heath mentioned the new coaching change in Carolina was beneficial for Chuba Hubbard, not so much for Thielen, and Bryce Young just continues to struggle no matter who's coaching him. So Adam Thielen now definitely in the wide receiver 3 range, and maybe even lower than that. And Pat Freiermuth, look, it was a disappointing performance. Obviously, there was some weather concerns in Pittsburgh that delayed that game, and the quarterback situation with Kenny Pickett going down. We'll see if Mr. Trubisky can bounce back and help Pat Freiermuth. It's not a tough necessarily situation you want to avoid him completely, but we may have just had a 1-week wonder with the coordinator change there in Pittsburgh. But to talk about the 2 Chargers here, Herbert and Eckler. We'll focus on Eckler because he's certainly the must start of the 2. Not that Herbert is not, but everybody drafted Austin Eckler in the top 3 overall picks, certainly top 5 overall picks, and he's had a bad season. He's been a bust. But here we go into Week 14 as they take on the Denver Broncos. It's sort of been the situation that's helped a lot of fantasy running backs. They made Dameon Pierce look relevant last week, so I think Eckler will bounce back. If he doesn't, we may be sitting him in the fantasy playoffs, as scary as that may sound. But I do think Eckler will have a bounce-back performance against the Broncos because most running backs have so far this season.
You mentioned it. Patrick Mahomes, another bad fantasy day. He's absolutely a loser. We get angry tweets now every Sunday when Patrick Mahomes plays. Listen, I still think most people are still going to start Mahomes on a weekly basis, but it's not a sure thing, especially if you happen to have somebody like Tua or CJ Stroud on your roster alongside with him. Speaking of no sure thing, that Falcons pass game continues to go up and down and up and down. Drake London, a boom-bust number 3 wide receiver. Maybe put him in the Gabe Davis category. David Njoku did not have the same connection at all with Joe Flacco, just 2 catches for 17 yards. But the big loser, Devin Singletary, had 4 straight games where he played at least 75% of the snaps, just a 46% snap share. We saw Dario Ogunbowale have as many targets as Singletary. Dameon Pierce dominated on rushing downs. It looks like, once again, you cannot trust a Texans running back, maybe even as a flex.
Yeah, please don't sit Patrick Mahomes against the Bills. I think he'll have a fun performance there as he goes head-to-head with Josh Allen. So should be a bounce-back game for Mahomes. All right, we got a lot of fantasy managers dealing with injuries heading into Week 14, certainly at the running back position. So let's help them out with an early look at the waiver wire here, and you're going to see the top of this list littered with running backs. So you have Derrick Henry leaving the game with a concussion. Ramondre Stevenson leaving his game with an ankle injury. Roschon Johnson looks like the lead running back for the Bears, which is why he's third on this list. But the top two guys, Tyjae Spears and Ezekiel Elliott, could be injury replacements for Week 14. And in the case of maybe Elliott, even beyond that, depending on how long Stevenson is out. So we're going to be looking at these running backs as potential injury replacements. And even in Philadelphia, we don't know the status of DeAndre Swift, who got hurt late in that game against San Francisco. So Kenneth Gainwell will have an opportunity to step up. Tough matchup against the Dallas Cowboys coming up in Week 14. But Spears could be a must-start running back. Elliott could be a must-start running back against Steelers. Remember, they just gave up 2 touchdowns to James Conner. So we could be looking at a lot of running back replacements heading into Week 14.
I was pretty excited about the increased target share for both Jonathan Mingo and Elijah Moore. Now, the efficiency is going to be bad. I don't know that these guys can ever elevate to be more than number 3 wide receivers, but they are definitely somebody to look for and available in most leagues. Gardner Minshew, it was nice that he gave us the confidence this week to start him again next week against another bad defense, the Cincinnati Bengals. Minshew will once again, I think the 3rd week in a row now, be the top streaming option, as will Isaiah Likely. Hopefully he can build on what he did before the bye.
And Elijah Moore could be another injury replacement as well, as Amari Cooper left the game for the Browns with a concussion, and Moore had 12 targets from Joe Flacco. We'll see if Flacco remains a starter for the Browns. Well, we know the Bengals have a starting quarterback concern heading into tonight's game against the Jaguars. Jaguars, not so much. Let's give everybody a taste of what our lineups will look like on FanDuel for the Monday night showdown between the Jaguars and the Bengals. I'll go first, and I'm going to go with a little bit of a different twist than the MVP, putting a tight end in that spot, and that's Evan Ingram. He's had a disappointing season. He's still searching for his first touchdown this year, but we just saw Pat Freiermuth unlock his potential against this Bengals defense. The Bengals are one of the worst teams at defending tight ends, and I think Ingram will have his best game to date connecting with Trevor Lawrence. I think Calvin Ridley keeps it going once again because anytime Zay Jones plays, Calvin Ridley just puts up good numbers. Ernest Johnson may get a few additional carries because of a banged-up Travis Etienne. And let's see what T. Higgins has to offer. Maybe him coming back from the injuries that he's dealt with lately will help this Bengals offense, help this Bengals passing attack. But T. Higgins will be a little bit of a wild card because I don't think many people will trust him, understandably so, because it's been a disappointing season for him and a disappointing season for the Bengals passing game of late.
I agree with you on Evan Ingram. I do have Trevor Lawrence in the MVP. My lineup is probably a little bit too chalky. The way I try to make up for that is play Christian Kirk instead of Calvin Ridley and then hope that Tanner Hudson scores a touchdown. I think the most important thing is you want to have 4 Jags. Whether you're playing their kicker and their defense, whether you're playing 4 offensive weapons, I'm staying away from the Bengals for the most part tonight.
Yeah, I think most people will stay away from the Bengals, which means that we'll be wrong and people win a lot of money because they'll trust the Bengals. But hey, we're trying to help you the best we can, and we think the Jaguars will dominate this game. You know what else will help you? Check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast. Wherever podcasts are found, we give you the best fantasy information. We are on the air every day of the week, and we help you in ways that nobody else does because that's why we are the best in the business. Again, the Fantasy Football Today podcast, wherever podcasts are found.